My name is Anna, and for the past 3 years, I've believed I was living the dream. A perfect relationship with Mark, a man I thought I could trust with everything, my heart, my future, my life. But now, as I sit in the quiet of our apartment, everything has shattered. I don't even know where to begin. Mark and I met at a mutual friend's party. He was charming, kind, and everything I thought I wanted. He had that effortless charisma that made everyone around him feel special. I remember the first time he looked at me, really looked at me, and I felt like the world stopped. In those first few months, he was everything a woman could ask for. He made me feel seen, important. I thought I had found my forever. But lately, things have been different. It started with small things that seemed insignificant at first, but with each passing day they grew into something bigger. His late nights at the office, his sudden trips out of town that always seemed to happen when I needed him the most. And when he was home, he wasn't really here. His mind was always elsewhere. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. He was busy, he worked hard, he loved me, didn't he? I trusted him. But then, I started noticing things that I couldn't ignore. It began with the phone. Mark used to leave his phone lying around, never worried about who could see it. But recently, he'd started keeping it close, even when we were sitting on the couch watching TV. I told myself it was just him being cautious, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The worst part? He'd become distant, emotionally unavailable in ways I couldn't understand. The man who used to hold my hand at every chance now barely touched me. But the real cracks started showing a few weeks ago when I overheard part of a phone conversation. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Mark took a call in the other room. I couldn't make out every word, but what I heard was enough to make my blood run cold. He said something about needing more time before he could see her, and how it was hard, but he had to choose the right moment. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Who was he talking to? Her? I wasn't stupid. It couldn't be about work. It was something else, something more intimate. But I didn't confront him right then. I needed proof, not accusations. The next day I found the courage to ask him. Mark brushed it off, claiming it was a colleague, someone he'd been working with on a major project. I wanted to believe him, but my gut was screaming that something was wrong. Still, I forced myself to trust him. After all, we were happy, weren't we? But over the next week, the tension grew. Every time I looked at him, I felt a distance I couldn't explain. He was always busy, on the phone, on his computer, rushing out the door to some mysterious meeting. He wasn't the same Mark I'd fallen in love with. I started checking his messages. At first, it was just curiosity. What harm could it do? But it wasn't long before I found something that stopped me in my tracks. Texts, sweet, intimate texts, from a woman named Lisa, and then, even worse, photos. Casual pictures of Mark at her house, laughing, hugging, and one of him with a child in his arms. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe it. Mark had another woman. He had a family, a life with someone else. The man I trusted, the man I loved, had been lying to me this entire time. I confronted him that night, shaking with rage and hurt. "Who is Lisa?" I demanded. "What is going on, Mark? Who is this woman?" His face paled as he stammered, unable to come up with a reasonable excuse. He tried to play it off, but I saw through him. "I can explain," he said, his voice low and pleading. "It's not what you think." But it was exactly what I thought. Mark admitted to everything. He confessed to having been seeing Lisa for years, that they had children together, and that he had been trying to juggle both families. But what came next left me speechless. "I love you, Anna," Mark said. "I've always loved you, and I love her too. But if I have to choose, I want to be with you. I want to marry you." I stood there, stunned, unable to process his words. How could he love me and her? How could he claim to want to marry me when he already had a family? It didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. "Do you think I'm just going to let this go?" I asked, my voice trembling with disbelief. "You're asking me to be the other woman, Mark, to live in the shadows of a life you already have with her and your kids." His face twisted with guilt. "I never meant to hurt you, Anna. I was wrong, and I know I've made mistakes. But I'm asking you to be with me. I want to make this right. I don't want to lose you." His words were nothing but empty promises. How could he even say he loved me, knowing that he had another family waiting for him? How could he want to marry me after betraying me like this? I needed space. I couldn't think clearly with him in front of me, so I asked him to leave. He promised he would change, that he would fix everything. But I knew in my heart it wasn't going to be that simple. A few days later, after Mark left, my body told me something that would change everything. I was pregnant, Mark's child. The fear I felt in that moment was unlike anything I had ever experienced. How could I be pregnant? How could I bring a child into this mess? I couldn't tell my family the truth, not now, not when I was already dealing with so much. I felt utterly alone in my confusion. I hadn't told Mark yet about the pregnancy. The idea of adding another complication to our already complex situation made my stomach turn. I didn't know what to do. If I told him, would he stay with me? Or would he choose his first family again? My parents had been uneasy about my relationship with Mark from the start. They had warned me that he seemed too perfect to be true, and that I should be cautious about trusting him completely. I didn't listen, though, because I was in love. Now, as the truth about his double life came to light, I realized they had been right all along. They were devastated when they found out. My mother couldn't even look at me without tears welling up in her eyes, and my father's face was filled with concern. "You deserve better than this, Anna," my father said, his voice rough with emotion. "You shouldn't have to fight for his love. You shouldn't have to compete with another woman and her children. You deserve someone who will choose you. Only you." I could feel their disappointment like a weight pressing down on my chest. My parents had never liked Mark, and now I understood why. They had seen through him in a way I hadn't. The pressure was unbearable. My mind was racing with so many thoughts, so many feelings. I had so much love for Mark, but how could I ignore the facts? Could I live with the consequences of his betrayal, knowing I was pregnant with his child? Could I build a future with a man who had already built a life with someone else? Mark continued to call, sending messages full of apologies and promises of a future together. But my emotions were all over the place. I felt betrayed, angry, and devastated. But I also couldn't ignore the love I still had for him. How could I possibly move forward knowing he had another family? Just when I thought I couldn't feel any more confused, Mark requested that we meet up at our favorite restaurant, and he proposed to me. He knelt down in front of me, his eyes full of emotion, and asked me to marry him. "I want to be with you, Anna," he said. "I've been wrong, but I can't live without you. Please, marry me." I didn't know what to say. I was overwhelmed, torn between the man I had loved and the truth that seemed too painful to face. But deep down, I knew that things would never be the same. Could I really marry a man who had another family? Could I trust him again? I told Mark to give me more time to think about the proposal and make the right decision. I'm totally confused at the moment. What would you do if you were in my shoes, knowing that you are soon to be a mother?